Honourable Shane Miller.
It's not about music, let me tell you. Mr President, on the wall outside the Blue Mountain City Council building in Katoomba reads a plaque, in quote, "In remembrance of the workers tragically killed and injured at work and those who have died from exposure to chemicals and asbestos," unveiled by Mayor Adam Searle in 2010. Mr President, it's a shame that the Council and the Mayors have not stopped and paid attention to that poignant memorial, because the Blue Mountain City Council has acted not only negligently but also potentially broken the laws in regards to worker safety on managing asbestos in their community. The Blue Mountain City Council is facing an asbestos crisis after an independent inquiry found the council instructed its workers to dig up, transport and sift through soil it knew was contaminated with asbestos. There were critical failures by the council driven by cost cutting. Unknown numbers of workers, family members and the general community were exposed to potentially dangerous levels of asbestos, including one worker who was exposed for an entire month. The worst case relates to Council's decision in 2016 to build a car park next to the Lawson Community Town Hall and to authorise the transportation of approximately 2,000 tonnes of contaminated soil to a nearby stockpile. Council has sat on the damaging findings from an independent inquiry into this scandal and the broader asbestos management practices of that council. Council has known since 2012 the car park land was contaminated with asbestos. Workers were then exposed to asbestos when they were instructed by the council to screen the asbestos from the soil so that the soil could be reused as fill or recycled. Both the recycling and the reuse of asbestos waste in any form is unlawful under the New South Wales Protection and Environmental Operations regulations. Now there is a voluntary lung screening program for all employees, which is being administered by the Dust Diseases Board. Over 130 employees of the council have already been screened. Of these, 77 workers have been deemed medium to high priority based on their potential exposure to the asbestos. The report identifies 10 critical failures in council's processes which culminated in the workers being exposed to the asbestos. It also identifies instances where workplace and safety regulations appear to have been breached. These acts were identified in the report as potential breach of Regulation 419 of the Work Health and Safety Regulations, which states it's unlawful to direct or allow a worker to carry out work involving asbestos. One of the more scandalous exposures relates to the screening of the contaminated soil I've referred to, which was undertaken by a construction worker at the stockpile yard. This screening activity over a period of 4 weeks using a piece of machinery called a hopper or a shaker. When the worker discovered what he believed to be asbestos in the soil he was screening, he was instructed by his council supervisor that it was not dangerous. He was directed to continue the work, but to stay in the cabin and wear a dust mask. The worker remained concerned and attempted to further protect himself by wearing a higher quality industrial dust mask. The report found a further 3 crews working in the vicinity of the contaminated material at the Lawson stockpile site between April and September last year were exposed. During this period, no signs were erected. At least one crew disturbed the stockpile in July 2017, including loading and unloading the soil off a truck during the course of a training exercise. Soil from the stockpiles was also used to fill at a private residence. Mr President, this is a debt-ridden council that is in debt $44 million. It has splurged $130,000 opposing the airport at Badgerys Creek. And last year, you may recall, defunded the Anzac Day marches. That was reversed after the state assisted. The council has approved an increase to its rates of 40%. From 2015 to 2019, extraordinary high increase. Yet it threatens to close down Katoomba and Blackheath swimming pools. In response to this mismanagement, cover-up and community risk, the Minister has threatened to suspend the council. The council's response to this was to waste more money in court against the New South Wales Government. In December, Safe Work New South Wales launched a full investigation into at least 7 contaminated sites in breaches of safety work laws, and even the United Services Union has alerted workers to their right to refuse to work if they believe they're exposed. I support the Minister for Local Government's move to suspend the council. The only way the Blue Mountains community can be confident that this asbestos issue can be resolved and other issues are not being covered up by this poisonous council culture that is not keen on transparency and scrutiny is the appointment of an administrator and the recruitment of an external general manager for the council. So how did the local state member respond to the mounting asbestos crisis that threatened the health of workers, their families and her constituents? Well, for months and months and months, there was deafening silence. Then on March 7, only a few days after the Sun Herald ran a story on the asbestos scandal, she pulled her own media stunt. To divert attention away from her Labor mates running Blue Mountains Council, she exposed herself to an illegal asbestos dump somewhere in the tens of thousands of hectares of the Blue Mountains National Park. This was an attempt to muddy up the water, an attempt to undermine the Minister for Local Government in doing her public duty. To quote the Minister, this is a pathetic attempt to mix the asbestos mismanagement issue at Blue Mountains Council with illegal dumping, clearly 2 different things. If she was a good local member, she would join me in raising questions about what has been going on at Blue Mountain City Council. I call upon the member for Blue Mountains to stop covering up for her Labor mates on Blue Mountains Council and support the government's measures to reinstall confidence and transparency in the Blue Mountain City Council.